Welcome to Ancient Relics Keeper. Uncover the hidden secrets of history, from ancient mysteries to lost civilizations. Join us on this thrilling journey. Subscribe and dive into the unknown. They were the terror of the ancient world. Nomadic warriors who swept across the vast steppes of Eurasia on horseback. The ancient Greeks called them barbarians, but the Scythians were much more. They were master goldsmiths, fierce fighters, and keepers of dark, shamanic rituals. For centuries, much of their culture was known only through the writings of their enemies. But in 2013, a chance discovery under a construction site in Russia blew the lid off their most secret practices. What was found? Solid gold artifacts unlike anything seen before, and inside them the residue of powerful drugs. Today, we peel back the layers of gold and myth to uncover the truth about the Scythian kings and their golden pipes. What rituals were they performing, and what visions were they chasing? History's greatest secrets are not always found in the hallowed halls of universities or in the forgotten archives of ancient libraries. Sometimes they lie sleeping just a few feet beneath our own, blissfully unaware that the modern world is roaring past just overhead. They wait patiently for a chance encounter, a moment when the veil between past and present is accidentally torn open. Our story begins not with a team of intrepid explorers, but with the mundane, rhythmic grind of progress. The year is 2013, and the location is a seemingly unremarkable patch of land near the town of Sanjalivsko, in the Stavropol region of southern Russia. This is the heartland of the Eurasian steppe, a vast, rolling sea of grass that has, for millennia, been a highway for migrating peoples, thundering armies, and nomadic empires. But on this particular day, the focus was not on the grand sweep of history, but on the practical needs of the 21st century. A construction crew was hard at work, their mission simple: to clear a path and lay the foundations for a new set of power lines. It was a routine job, the kind of project happening all over the world. The sun beat down on the dusty landscape as heavy machinery, including powerful bulldozers, methodically scraped and leveled the earth, preparing the ground for the pylons that would soon stretch across the horizon. The workers were focused on their blueprints, their deadlines, and the earth immediately in front of them. They had no reason to suspect they were about to stumble into a secret that had been kept for more than 2,500 years. The day progressed like any other, filled with the noise and dust of construction. Then it happened. The driver of a bulldozer, pushing a load of topsoil, felt a sudden, jarring resistance. The machine's powerful engine strained, and the massive steel blade screeched as it scraped against something unyielding. It wasn't the soft give of earth or the familiar crunch of a small rock. This was different. It was solid, massive, and felt structured. The driver stopped the machine, frustration likely his first emotion. Delays on a construction site cost time and money, and unexpected underground obstacles were a common, if unwelcome, part of the job. The crew gathered around, expecting to find a large, natural boulder or a forgotten concrete foundation from a more recent era. They brought in smaller equipment, perhaps an excavator, to dig around the obstruction and see what they were dealing with. As they began to clear away the surrounding soil, the nature of the obstacle started to change. This wasn't a single, isolated boulder. What they were uncovering was a complex, layered structure. There were thick deposits of dense clay, which seemed out of place with the surrounding topsoil. Beneath the clay, they found large, flat stones, carefully arranged in what looked like a deliberate pattern. The workers, though not archaeologists, recognized that what they were looking at was not a product of nature. This was man-made. In this part of the world, a discovery like this sets off alarm bells for anyone with a passing knowledge of local history. The steppes are famous for one particular type of ancient monument, the kurgan. Kurgans are burial mounds, great earthen barrows raised over the tombs of the nobles and chieftains of the ancient nomadic peoples who once ruled this land. These mounds can range from small, barely noticeable bumps on the landscape to massive, man-made hills. The construction crew realized they had not just hit a rock. They had inadvertently sliced into the edge of one of these sacred ancient sites. Work on the power lines came to an immediate halt. The authorities were notified, and soon, a team of archaeologists, led by Dr. Anton Gass, arrived at the scene. For the construction workers, the site had been an obstacle. For the archaeologists, it was a time capsule. They knew that Kurgans were the burial places of the legendary Scythians, the fierce nomadic warriors who dominated these steppes from roughly the 9th to the 3rd century BC. They were famous for their mastery of horseback warfare, their stunning gold work, and what the ancient Greeks described as their barbaric customs. However, over the millennia, the vast majority of these kurgans had been looted. Grave robbers, both ancient and modern, had plundered these tombs, stealing the priceless gold treasures that were buried with the Scythian elite. Finding an undisturbed kurgan is the dream of every archaeologist who works in the region. The initial assessment of the Sędzielewsko II site, as it came to be known, was not overly optimistic. The mound was relatively flat and unassuming, suggesting it might have already been plundered or was perhaps a minor, less wealthy burial. The damage from the bulldozer was also a serious concern. The archaeologists began their work with a sense of cautious professionalism, their hopes tempered by experience. They started by carefully clearing away the damage caused by the construction equipment, meticulously documenting every layer of soil, every stone, every fragment of pottery. It was slow, painstaking work, a delicate surgical operation on the body of the earth. As they excavated deeper, following the lines of the stone and clay structure the bulldozer had revealed, they realized this kurgan was different. The builders had been clever. They had constructed what appeared to be a complex system of defensive layers, a maze of packed earth and stone designed to deter anyone trying to tunnel their way to the center. It was as if the Scythians had anticipated the threat of grave robbers and had turned their tomb into a fortress. This raised the archaeologists' hopes. Perhaps the ancient looters had been defeated by these clever defenses. Perhaps the central chamber, if there was one, was still intact. After days of careful digging, they made their breakthrough. Their tools uncovered the edge of a massive, flat flagstone. Clearing around it, they found another and another. They were standing on the roof of a buried chamber. It was a small, rectangular space, about 1 meter square, constructed with incredible care from massive stone slabs. It was a secret vault, a strongbox hidden within the heart of the kurgan. The excitement on the site was now palpable. With extreme care, they lifted the heavy capstone, revealing the dark, undisturbed space within. This was the moment of truth. Was it empty, another looted tomb? Or had they found what every archaeologist hopes for? A sealed deposit, a perfect snapshot of the past. They shone their lights into the darkness, and the darkness shone back. The chamber wasn't filled with dust and disappointment. It was filled with the unmistakable warm gleam of gold. The initial discovery was breathtaking. This wasn't a burial chamber in the traditional sense. There were no skeletons, no human remains to be found. Instead, it was a hidden stash, a ritual deposit, or a secret hoard of immense value. It was a treasure chest, locked away for 2,400 years and now, for the first time, seeing the light of day. The team began the delicate process of removing the artifacts one by one. The first and most significant objects to emerge were 2 large, bucket-shaped vessels. They were made of electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver, but they shone with the brilliance of pure gold. They were heavy, solid, and exquisitely crafted. Even covered in the dirt of millennia, their quality was undeniable. As they were gently cleaned, intricate scenes began to appear, etched into their surfaces images of warriors in combat, and mythological beasts locked in a primal struggle. These were not simple drinking cups. They were masterpieces of Scythian art. But that was not all. Alongside these two spectacular vessels, the chamber yielded more treasures. There was a heavy, solid gold finger ring, a priceless piece of personal adornment. There were 2 gold neck rings, or torques, classic symbols of Scythian nobility. And there were 3 small gold cups. In total, the hoard weighed over 3 kilograms, or nearly 7 pounds. In the ancient world, this amount of gold represented an almost unimaginable fortune. It was a king's ransom, the kind of treasure that would have been the target of every grave robber on the steppe. The discovery sent waves of excitement through the archaeological community. An intact, high-status Scythian hoard is an exceptionally rare find. The quality of the goldwork was stunning, a blend of the classic Scythian animal style with clear influences from the Greek artisans who lived in colonies along the Black Sea coast. This hoard was a testament to the Scythians' immense wealth, which they likely acquired through trade, taxation of agricultural communities, and, of course, warfare. They were not just barbarians. They were connoisseurs of fine art who could commission or create objects of breathtaking beauty. The accidental discovery at Sędzielewsko too was a resounding success. The construction crew, through their chance encounter, had led archaeologists to one of the most significant Scythian finds of the 21st century. The artifacts themselves provided a new, rich source of information about Scythian art, mythology, and their connections with the wider world. The team had successfully unearthed a royal secret, a hidden treasure that had defied the odds and survived for 2.5 millennia. Yet, as the initial euphoria of the discovery began to settle, new questions started to emerge. Why was this treasure here? The absence of a body was puzzling. Was this a ritual offering to the gods? Or was it a hidden stash, buried for safekeeping during a time of war, with its owners never able to return to reclaim it? And what of the 2 main vessels? Their shape was unusual, and their function was not immediately obvious. They were clearly the centerpiece of the collection, the most important objects in the hoard. But what were they for? As the archaeologists carefully examined the thick, black residue caked on the inside of these golden vessels, they began to suspect that the greatest secret of this accidental treasure was not the gold itself, but the story of what the Scythian kings had used it for. The true investigation was only just beginning. Once a treasure of this magnitude is unearthed, the real work of an archaeologist begins. The dust and soil of the kurgan are left behind, and the artifacts are moved from the field to the sterile, controlled environment of the laboratory. Here, under the bright lights of conservation and analysis, the objects begin to speak. Every scratch, every curve, every intricate image becomes a word in a long-dead language. The Sędzielewsko II hoard was more than just a collection of precious metal. It was a library of Scythian belief, frozen in gold. To understand the secret rituals of the warrior kings, we must first learn to read the stories they etched onto their most sacred possessions. We will now deconstruct these artifacts piece by piece, like a forensic art analyst examining evidence from a crime scene of ancient, ritualistic magic. Our primary focus, our Exhibit A, must be the 2 spectacular golden vessels that formed the heart of the discovery. At first glance, their function is a complete puzzle. They are roughly bucket-shaped, standing about 10 to 12 inches tall. They are wide at the top and taper down to a much narrower base. But unlike a cup or a vase, they are not designed to hold liquid. A close examination reveals small, deliberate perforations at the bottom. Whatever was placed inside these vessels was not meant to be contained. It was meant to be filtered, burned, or transformed in some way. This strange, impractical design is our first major clue that these objects were not for everyday use. They were specialized tools, built for a very specific, and as yet unknown, purpose. But it is the artwork that covers their surfaces that truly elevates them from curious objects to profound historical documents. Let's examine the first vessel. Its surface is a whirlwind of controlled, violent action. The central scene is dominated by the figure of an older, bearded man. He is depicted with an air of authority and immense power. His hair is long, his features are sharp, and he is clearly a figure of high status, a king, a chieftain, or perhaps a warrior priest. But he is not a benevolent ruler. He is shown in the act of slaughter. He is surrounded by younger, clean-shaven warriors, and he is systematically killing them. The detail is both gruesome and magnificent. In one section, he is shown slitting the throat of a young soldier. In another, he appears to be dispatching an enemy with a spear. The emotion in the scene is palpable, the grim determination of the old warrior and the agony of his victims. This is not a generic battle scene. It's highly specific. Who is this older man, and why is he killing younger men? One interpretation is that this is a literal depiction of a historical event, a specific battle where an aging Scythian king defended his throne against a rebellion of younger challengers. It could be a piece of visual propaganda, a golden declaration of the king's power and his right to rule. Another theory suggests something more mythological. The scene could represent a foundational myth of the Scythian people, perhaps a story of how the first king established his dominion, a tale similar to the Greek myths of Cronus overthrowing Uranus. The old represents the established order, while the young represent the chaos that must be subdued. The artwork is so detailed and narrative that it feels like a single frame from an epic poem or a lost Scythian saga, a story we can now only see, but no longer read. Now we turn to the second vessel, and the story shifts from the world of men to the realm of myth. The surface of this artifact is dominated by one of the most powerful and terrifying creatures in Scythian cosmology, the griffin. The griffin is a legendary beast with the body, tail, and back legs of a lion, and the head, wings, and talons of an eagle. It is a perfect predator, a king of both beasts and birds. In the ancient world, griffins were seen as guardians of treasure, particularly gold, and as fierce protectors of the sacred. On this golden vessel, the griffins are not passive guardians. They are unleashed, primal forces of nature. They are depicted in the act of tearing apart other animals. In one visceral scene, a griffin has its talons sunk deep into the back of a stag. In another, a griffin rips at the flesh of a horse. The violence here is just as intense as on the first vessel, but it is a different kind of violence. It is the violence of the natural world, the clash between predator and prey, life and death. For the Scythians, whose lives were so closely tied to their animals, especially the horse, this imagery would have been incredibly potent. The horse was their partner in life and war, their most valuable possession. To see it being destroyed by a mythological creature was a powerful statement. This scene is likely a depiction of the spirit world, or the underworld. Griffins were believed to be psychopomps, creatures that could travel between the world of the living and the world of the dead. The scene could represent the soul's perilous journey after death, where it must face the monstrous guardians of the afterlife. Or it could be a shamanic vision, a glimpse into a supernatural realm where the rules of our world no longer apply. When we consider the two vessels together, a fascinating duality emerges. One vessel depicts the world of men, of history, politics, and earthly combat. The other depicts the world of spirits, of myth, and of supernatural conflict. They are two sides of the same coin, representing the two realms that a Scythian king had to master, the physical battlefield and the spiritual landscape. The crucial question that arises from this analysis is this: Were these images merely decorative, or were they connected to the function of the vessels themselves? Were they simply stories etched in gold, or were they meant to be activated during a ritual? Were they illustrations of the visions that the users of these vessels hoped to see? This question hangs in the air, a tantalizing mystery that the art alone cannot solve. To go deeper, we must look at the other items found in the hoard. This brings us to our Exhibit B, the golden cups, rings, and torques that were buried alongside the two main vessels. While less spectacular in their narrative detail, these items are crucial for establishing the context of the find. They are the supporting evidence that reinforces the immense status of the objects and their owners. There were 3 small gold cups, exquisitely made, and a heavy, solid gold finger ring. Most significantly, there were 2 neck rings or torques. In the Celtic and Scythian worlds, the torque was the ultimate symbol of nobility and power. It was worn by kings, queens, and the greatest warriors. To be given a torque was a sign of immense favor. To own 2 was a sign of supreme authority. The presence of these items confirms that the hoard was not a random collection of gold objects. It was a set, a complete ritual kit belonging to an individual or group of the highest possible rank. This was not the property of a common soldier or a minor chieftain. This was the paraphernalia of royalty, or of the most powerful priests in the Scythian kingdom. The style of the gold work itself tells another important story. The masterful depiction of animals and the fluid, dynamic lines are classic hallmarks of the Scythian animal style. However, the realistic rendering of the human figures on the first vessel shows a clear influence from the classical art of ancient Greece. The Scythians were not an isolated people. They controlled the vast trade routes of the steppe and had extensive contact with the Greek colonies on the northern shores of the Black Sea. They traded grain and slaves for Greek wine, pottery, and luxury goods. They also likely hired Greek craftsmen to create bespoke pieces for them, or Scythian artisans learned and adapted Greek techniques. These golden vessels are a perfect example of this cultural fusion. They are Scythian in their soul. Their subject matter is violent, spiritual, and deeply tied to their nomadic worldview. But they are Hellenistic in their execution, showing a level of realism and narrative clarity that was influenced by their more settled neighbors. These artifacts are a crossroads, a meeting point of the barbarian steppe and the civilized Mediterranean, a testament to a complex and cosmopolitan culture. So, after a thorough forensic analysis of the artifacts, what have we learned? We have established that the 2 main vessels were specialized ritual tools, not for everyday use. We have decoded the stories on their surfaces, revealing a complex worldview that encompassed both earthly warfare and mythological journeys. We have confirmed, through the accompanying items, that this was a royal or high priestly kit of immense value and status. And we have seen how these objects represent a powerful fusion of Scythian and Greek cultures. But despite all this, the central question remains unanswered. What was the ritual? What were these strange, perforated golden buckets actually used for? The art provides us with the why, to tell stories, to depict visions, to represent the 2 realms. The context provides us with the who, Scythian kings or priests, but we are still missing the how. How did these objects function? The answer, it turns out, was not to be found by looking at the outside of the vessels, but by looking inside. The final clue was not etched in gold, but was hidden in the humble, sticky black residue that had been ignored for 2,400 years. This residue would be the key that unlocked the entire mystery, transforming these artifacts from beautiful works of art into something far more shocking and profound. The forensic analysis of the art had taken us as far as it could. Now, it was time for the chemical analysis to take over the investigation. Art and archaeology can take us remarkably far on a journey into the past. By studying the intricate carvings on the Scythian gold, we have begun to understand the minds of their creators. We've seen their world of brutal warfare, their belief in mythical beasts, and their obsession with power and status. We have, in essence, read the cover of the book. But to understand the true story, to uncover the secret ritual at the heart of this discovery, we need to open the book itself. And in this case, the story was not written in ink, but was preserved in a thick, black, tar-like residue caked onto the inner surfaces of the two golden vessels. This humble substance, so easily overlooked, was about to become the most important clue in the entire investigation. The mystery now moves from the art history studio to the forensic science laboratory. The lead archaeologist on the excavation, Anton Gass, was a seasoned expert in Scythian culture. He knew from the start that these vessels were special. Their strange shape, with the perforations at the bottom, immediately told him they weren't designed for drinking. The Scythians had plenty of beautiful drinking cups and bowls, known as fiali, some of which were even found in this very hoard. These two bucket-shaped artifacts were different. They were tools. As he and his team carefully cleaned the objects, they paid close attention to that stubborn black residue. It was a painstaking process, as they didn't want to damage the precious gold, but they knew that this substance could hold the key. This is where a crucial hypothesis began to form. Dr. Gass was intimately familiar with the ancient texts that described the Scythians, particularly the writings of the 5th century BC Greek historian, Herodotus. Herodotus, often called the father of history, traveled widely and documented the customs of many barbarian peoples, including the Scythians. In one famous passage, he describes a unique Scythian ritual. He writes that after the burial of a king, the Scythians would undergo a ritual of purification. They would construct small, enclosed tents made of felt. Inside, they would place a dish with red-hot stones. Then, they would throw hemp seeds, what we know today as cannabis, onto these hot stones. Herodotus writes that the seeds would smoke and produce a vapor or steam, so thick that no Greek steam bath can surpass it. He concludes by saying the Scythians would howl with pleasure at the experience. For a long time, historians debated this passage. Was Herodotus reporting accurately, or was he exaggerating, telling a wild tale to entertain his Greek audience? The idea of fierce warriors howling with pleasure in a steam tent seemed almost comical. But the discovery at Sędzielewsko too provided a potential physical link to this ancient story. Dr. Gass looked at the golden vessels with their strange perforations and the black residue inside, and he made a bold connection. What if these weren't just ritual objects, but the very equipment used for such a ceremony? What if they were, in essence, a pair of incredibly ornate, solid gold braziers, or even more provocatively, a set of royal bongs? The hypothesis was tantalizing. These vessels were used for burning psychoactive substances. There was only one way to find out for sure. The black residue had to be analyzed. A small, carefully extracted sample of the tar-like substance was sent to a specialized forensic laboratory in Moscow. This is where the ancient world met the cutting edge of modern science. The chemists in the lab were tasked with identifying the molecular fingerprint of the residue. They would use a powerful technique called gas chromatography mass spectrometry, or GCMS. This is the gold standard in forensic chemistry, the same technology used by police forces around the world to identify unknown substances at crime scenes. The process is incredibly precise. First, the sample is vaporized into a gas. This gas is then pushed through a long, thin tube in a process called gas chromatography. Different chemical compounds travel through the tube at different speeds, which separates them. As each separated compound exits the tube, it enters the mass spectrometer, which acts like a highly sensitive scale for molecules. It bombards the compounds with electrons, breaking them apart and measuring the mass of the resulting fragments. Every chemical compound has a unique fragmentation pattern, a unique fingerprint. By matching this fingerprint against a vast library of known substances, scientists can identify exactly what was in the original sample. The lab began its analysis. The archaeologists waited, the anticipation immense. The results of this test could either confirm a wild theory, rewriting our understanding of Scythian ritual life, or it could reveal the residue to be nothing more than simple soot from burning wood or incense, sending them back to the drawing board. The reputation of Herodotus as a reliable historian was, in a way, also on trial. When the results came back from the lab, they were more explosive than anyone could have imagined. The first finding confirmed the team's hypothesis in spectacular fashion. The GCMS analysis detected a clear and unmistakable chemical signature: cannabinoids. These are the active compounds found in the cannabis plant. The test proved, beyond any doubt, that the Scythians had been burning cannabis inside these golden vessels. Herodotus was right. His seemingly bizarre story of the Scythian vapor baths was not a tall tale. It was an accurate ethnographic report. The discovery provided the first-ever direct, physical evidence to support his 2,400-year-old account. The Scythian kings and their elite warrior class were indeed using marijuana for ritual purposes. The howling with pleasure that Herodotus described was likely the euphoric, disinhibiting effect of inhaling a large quantity of potent cannabis smoke in an enclosed space. This discovery alone was a landmark achievement, a perfect marriage of ancient text and modern science. But the laboratory report contained a second, even more startling revelation. As the scientists analyzed the full spectrum of the chemical data, another entirely unexpected compound appeared. Its molecular fingerprint was also clear, also undeniable. The residue contained opiates. Specifically, the chemical markers indicated the presence of opium, derived from the opium poppy. This was the real shocker. While cannabis use among the Scythians had been described by Herodotus, there is absolutely no mention in any ancient text of them using opium. No previous archaeological find had ever suggested it. This was completely new information, a secret that had been perfectly kept for 2.5 millennia. The implications of this second finding were profound. The Scythian ritual was not just a cannabis-fueled cleansing ceremony. It was a far more complex and potent pharmacological event. They weren't just using one substance. They were deliberately creating a powerful psychoactive cocktail. Cannabis is primarily a hallucinogen and euphoriant, while opium is a powerful sedative and narcotic, producing intense feelings of pleasure and dreamlike states. The combination of the two would have resulted in a profound alteration of consciousness, far more intense and otherworldly than either drug could produce on its own. This wasn't a casual affair. This was a carefully managed chemical ritual designed to transport the user to another state of being. With these stunning chemical results in hand, the mystery of the golden vessels was finally solved. We can now state with scientific certainty what they were. They were not cups. They were not vases. They were not lamps. They were a pair of incredibly sophisticated, high-status, solid gold drug delivery devices. They were, in effect, ceremonial bongs or braziers, custom-built for the inhalation of a potent mixture of cannabis and opium smoke. The design now made perfect sense. The vessels would likely have been used in a group setting, perhaps inside a sealed tent as Herodotus described. Hot stones could have been placed inside, or charcoal could have been lit at the bottom. The cannabis and opium, perhaps mixed together in a prepared resin, would then be placed on top of the heat source. The perforations at the bottom of the vessels would have allowed for airflow, ensuring that the mixture smoldered slowly and produced a thick, continuous stream of smoke. The wide mouth at the top would have allowed multiple users to gather around and inhale the rising vapor. These were not personal pipes. They were communal ritual instruments, designed for a shared spiritual experience. The discovery of this potent drug cocktail fundamentally changes our perception of Scythian culture. It elevates their rituals from simple purification ceremonies to complex shamanic practices. These warrior kings were not just getting high for pleasure in the modern sense. They were using these powerful psychoactive substances as a technology for accessing the spirit world. They were spiritual explorers, using a chemical key to unlock the doors of perception. The brutal warrior ethos depicted on the outside of the vessels was balanced by a deep, internal world of visions and trances. This discovery forces us to see the Scythians not as one-dimensional barbarians, but as a people with a rich and complex inner life, who invested their immense wealth in creating the ultimate tools for their spiritual journeys. The chemical clues, hidden in that simple black residue, had provided the final, missing piece of the puzzle, allowing us to finally understand the true, secret purpose of the golden pipes. We have followed the clues from the dusty construction site to the sterile laboratory. We have analyzed the intricate artwork and decoded the chemical secrets hidden within the golden vessels. We now have all the pieces of the puzzle: the royal artifacts, the violent and mythological imagery, and the scientific proof of a potent drug cocktail. The time has come to put these pieces together. We can now step out of the role of the investigator and into the role of the storyteller to reconstruct the ancient ceremony that has been lost to time. By combining the archaeological evidence with our knowledge of shamanic cultures, we can attempt to recreate the sacred ritual of the Scythian kings. Our reconstruction must begin with the most fundamental question: why? Why did these powerful, pragmatic warrior kings, who lived and died by the sword, invest so much wealth and effort into a ritual centered on drug-induced trances? The answer lies in the very soul of their belief system. Scythian religion was not based on grand temples or written holy books like the religions of Greece or Egypt. It was deeply rooted in shamanism. Shamanism is one of humanity's oldest spiritual practices, and its core belief is that the visible, everyday world is not the only reality. It coexists with an invisible spirit world, a realm inhabited by ancestors, gods, demons, and powerful animal spirits. For a shamanistic culture, this spirit world was not a distant, abstract heaven or hell. It was a tangible reality that constantly influenced the world of the living. The spirits could bring good fortune or bad, a successful hunt or a failed harvest, victory in battle or a devastating defeat. A king's duty, therefore, was not just to lead his armies, but to mediate between these two worlds. He, or his most trusted priests, needed a way to travel to the spirit realm to seek knowledge, to appease angry gods, to bargain with ancestors, or to gain supernatural power before a major battle. This journey was not taken lightly. It was a dangerous spiritual quest, and it required a powerful vehicle. The psychoactive cocktail of cannabis and opium was that vehicle. The drugs were not for simple recreation. They were a sacred technology, a chemical key that unlocked the gateway to the other side. With this understanding of the why, we can now begin to reconstruct the how. The ritual would not have taken place in the open air, where the precious smoke would dissipate. It would have occurred in an enclosed, sacred space, most likely a felt tent or yurt, just as Herodotus described. This space would be set apart from the everyday camp, a temporary temple erected for this specific purpose. Inside, the air would be still and heavy with anticipation. A select group would be present, perhaps a king and his most trusted circle of warlords and chieftains, or a powerful shaman preparing for a spiritual journey. The participants would be seated in a circle, the hierarchy of their society reflected in their positions. At the center of this circle, the two golden vessels would be placed. They would not just be tools. They would be the focal point of the entire ceremony, their polished surfaces gleaming in the flickering firelight. The ritual would likely begin with the heating of the vessels. This could have been done by lighting a small charcoal fire within them, or, as Herodotus suggests, by dropping red-hot stones, heated in a nearby fire, into their bases. The gold itself, an excellent conductor of heat, would become warm to the touch, adding to the sensory experience. Once the vessels were sufficiently hot, the sacred mixture would be introduced. It wouldn't have been loose plant matter. It was more likely a carefully prepared resin or paste, a blend of cannabis flowers and concentrated opium poppy extract, perhaps mixed with other aromatic herbs. A shaman would ceremonially place a portion of this dark, sticky substance onto the hot stones. Instantly, a thick, white, aromatic smoke would begin to billow upwards, filling the small tent. The smoke would be dense and heavy, clinging to the felt walls, quickly enveloping the participants in a fragrant cloud. The ritual had begun. The gateway was opening. This leads us to the heart of the experience. The what? What did the Scythian kings see and feel inside that smoke-filled tent? We can only speculate, but modern pharmacology and our understanding of shamanic trance states can give us a powerful glimpse into their inner world. The effects would not have been instantaneous. They would have built slowly as the participants breathed in the thick, drug-laden air. The first effects would likely come from the cannabis. A sense of euphoria and relaxation would wash over them. The world outside the tent would fade away, their focus drawn inward. Their senses would become heightened. The sound of the chanting would seem deeper. The patterns on the tent walls might begin to shift and breathe, and the golden glow of the vessels would feel intensely alive. Then the opium would take hold. Opium is a powerful narcotic that induces a state of profound, dreamlike bliss. It dulls pain, erases anxiety, and creates a feeling of serene detachment from the physical body. The combination would be extraordinary. The cannabis would open the doors of perception and stimulate hallucinations, while the opium would provide the dreamlike, floating sensation of a journey. The user might feel as if their spirit was detaching from their body, rising up with the smoke. This is a classic element of the shamanic trance. The soul flight. The visions would begin. They would not be gentle or peaceful. Scythian culture was hard, violent, and deeply connected to the primal forces of nature. Their visions would reflect their world. They might see themselves flying over the vast steppe, their spirit embodied in an eagle. They might journey deep into the earth, into a dark underworld where they would have to confront monstrous guardians. This is where the artwork on the golden vessels becomes so incredibly important, because we can now make the final, crucial connection. The violent and mythological images etched onto the gold were not just random decorations. They were a roadmap for the trip. They were a visual guide to the spirit world, and perhaps even a record of previous journeys. As a warrior king sat in the smoke, his mind saturated with the powerful chemicals, he might look at the golden vessel and see the images come to life. The scene of the older man killing the younger warriors might transform into a vision of his own spiritual battle, a struggle against the chaotic forces that threatened his reign or his soul. He wasn't just observing the art. He was participating in it. The other vessel, with its depiction of griffins tearing apart stags and horses, would become a window into the underworld. The griffin, the terrifying guardian, would become his adversary or his guide on his journey through the spirit realm. The destruction of the horse, his most prized earthly possession, would symbolize the sacrifice required to enter the world of the spirits. To journey to the other side, you had to leave the things of this world behind. The artifacts, therefore, served a dual purpose. They were the physical engines of the ritual, the braziers that produced the sacred smoke. But they were also the psychic anchors, the visual focus points that shaped and guided the hallucinatory experience. They were both the map and the vehicle for the journey. The ritual might last for hours, with the shaman guiding the experience through chants, drumming, and storytelling. The participants would travel far into their inner landscapes, seeking answers, power, or communion with the divine. When the effects of the drugs finally began to fade and the smoke cleared, they would return to their bodies, exhausted but spiritually transformed. They would come back with the knowledge they had sought, a prophecy about an upcoming battle, a message from a long-dead ancestor, or a renewed sense of their own divine power and right to rule. This reconstruction provides a powerful and cohesive explanation for the entire discovery. The hidden chamber was not a tomb, but a geniza, a sacred place for storing ritual objects that were too powerful to be discarded. The golden vessels were the central tools of a shamanic ceremony designed to induce a powerful trance state. The drug cocktail of cannabis and opium was the fuel for this spiritual engine. And the intricate art was the visual manifestation of the journey itself, a permanent record of the visions seen in the smoke. The Scythian kings, so often portrayed simply as mounted archers and brutal conquerors, are revealed to be something much more complex. They were warrior mystics who ruled two realms at once. They commanded armies on the steppes of Eurasia, but they also commanded visions in the inner world of the spirit. The golden pipes of Senjalivsko II are the ultimate proof of this duality. They are the magnificent, terrifying, and beautiful tools of a lost civilization that believed the greatest treasures were not fought for on the battlefield, but were found in the visions that came from a cloud of sacred smoke. The golden pipes of Senjalivsko II have opened a new window into the soul of the Scythian world. They reveal that these so-called barbarians were not just brutal warriors, but also spiritual explorers who crafted some of history's most luxurious drug paraphernalia to journey into other realms. These artifacts are a stunning intersection of wealth, violence, and shamanic belief. They remind us that for many ancient cultures, the line between the physical world and the spirit world was thin, and sometimes it could be crossed with the help of a little gold and a cloud of sacred smoke. The Scythian kings are long gone, but their golden visions remain, forever captured on the treasures they left buried beneath the steppe. Thanks for exploring history's mysteries with Ancient Relics Keeper. Like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. What secret should we unravel next? Stay curious and see you soon.